for the sharing of the recording for those who aren't able to attend, if they want to view this event before they vote. And we'll be telling everyone at the end of this event how to access that recording. We'll be sharing it on our websites and so on, but we'll tell you that at the end of this gathering. I want to introduce myself. I'm Brian McIntosh. I'm a member of both ECULINKS Etobicoke and the Etobicoke Climate Action group. Very happy to be involved with both groups, and I was chosen to be the moderator both for last night and for tonight's Etobicoke Centre Town Hall. And I want to, before we go any further, share this acknowledgement. As we begin today, we acknowledge the history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land of the Indigenous peoples of this region, including the Huron-Wendat, Petun, and Seneca nations, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit, who are Anishinaabe people. This territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Ojibwa and allied nations. And we seek to live in respect, peace, and right relations with them as we live, work, play, and vote upon their traditional territory. Thank you for that. And I want to note that our theme for tonight is building a sustainable Ontario for everyone that is equitable, livable, economically competitive, and ready for the future. We have sent the candidates some preset questions, 6 of them, and we will be offering 6 questions on the following topics, and this will be important as I tell you how to use the Q&A function. The 6 topics are GHG, greenhouse gas emissions, biodiversity, poverty reduction, affordable housing, long-term care, and a sustainable green economy for everyone. And those 6 topics are going to be covered in our 6 preset questions. So as you use the Q&A function, you'll note that the chat function doesn't really, you're not able to access the chat function, but you can access the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And beyond those 6 topics, we'd love to hear from you by writing in a question, not related perhaps to those topics, but others of interest. And then you can use the upvote section of that Q&A area to upvote the questions that you think are really important. So at the end of our preset questions, we'll be asking our candidates a couple of questions from the audience that have been upvoted in importance. So just note that and do use that Q&A feature as you are able to. I want to introduce our tech team. We have Tim Ellis and Alex Cameron as our tech team. Maybe that's Tim, I don't know. Is that Tim? And Alex Cameron as well as our tech team. And I want to note our timekeeper also on screen is Cora Dusk, and she'll be holding up green cards and then yellow cards and red cards. A green card to start the answer, a yellow card you'll see, the candidates will see when there's 30 seconds left in our timekeeping. And then the red card when the 2 or the 3 minutes are up, depending on whether it's an opening remark or an answer. Each candidate will get 3 minutes for an opening remark, and then you'll be timed on that. And then we'll, as we ask the questions, each candidate will be asked a question, and each preceding question will have a cascading sort of order to it. So I won't ask the same candidate to answer first each time. And note that there'll be 2 minutes for each answer on each preset question. I think with those introductions and that sort of gatekeeping, let's proceed. I want to begin by saying that our candidates that have joined us are from the Green Party of Ontario, Brian McLean, and from the Ontario Liberal Party, Noel Semple, and from the Ontario NDP, Heather Vickers-Wong, And it's wonderful that you've joined us tonight. Thank you so much. We hope that this is an opportunity for you to inform your voters as well about your interests and your values and your party's platforms. I'm going to start with opening remarks from all three of you. You have 3 minutes. And I've arbitrarily started with the alphabetical order of the parties. So G is first. So the Green Party candidate, Brian McLean, will be first with the opening remark.
Hi there. Thank you for hosting this to Etobicoke Climate Action and ECULINKS Etobicoke, and thank you to everyone who is attending tonight, the residents of Etobicoke Centre. I'd like to be your next MPP to support the excellent work that Green Party leader Mike Schreiner has done over the past 4 years. If you watched the leaders' debate on Monday, I think you'll agree that he was the most articulate, thoughtful, caring person in that discussion. I was born in Ottawa, my father born in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, and I now live in Toronto and in Etobicoke specifically. All 4 of those places bear names from Indigenous languages. I've been learning over the past 10 plus years, kind of late in life, but still, about the Indigenous history of Toronto and of Canada, and I'm doing my best to learn from books and events I've attended and from Indigenous friends I've made about how to live well in this particular space. It's not any place, it's this particular place that's been lived in for thousands of years. We're all enriched and discover our deep responsibilities to this place and to each other through Indigenous teachings and the relationships we develop. I've walked and cycled on Etobicoke streets and along its creeks and the Humber River. I've shopped in its stores. I've led walking tours here. And over the winter, I trained to be a volunteer Toronto nature steward in Raymore Park on the Humber River. Some doctors now prescribe nature, time in nature as the 4th pillar of health after healthy food, adequate sleep, and exercise. And in Etobicoke, we know that nature is not out there somewhere, it's all around us. We are a part of it with every breath we take. So I've stepped forward as a candidate with a special sense of obligation to young people and to the parents and grandparents who care about their future. My second reason is the scandal of conditions in our long-term care homes where many of our cherished seniors live. My mother lives still in an excellent one in Kingston, but here in Etobicoke Centre, the for-profit Eatonville Care Centre suffered 42 deaths from a shortage of staff, training, and equipment. The Canadian Armed Forces had to be called in and had to stay for 6 weeks. What has changed since then? My third reason is my sense that democracy has been diminished over the past 4 years. I take it personally that the new Ford government 4 years ago grossly interfered in our city elections that were well underway. And the absence of the Conservative candidate tonight is further disrespect. So I'd love to be starting my career now with so many options for valuable work in the new climate economy, work that will really make our community safer and healthier for all. The Green Party isn't about saving the planet, it's about saving us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. And secondly, I'm going to go to the Liberal Party and Noel.
Thank you, Brian. And let me echo what Brian McLean said in thanking ECULINKS and Etobicoke Climate Action for organizing this. It really is a true public service to give voters and candidates the opportunity to meet in this neutral forum and have a civil discussion about our plans and where we're coming from. So my name is Noel Semple, and I'm your Ontario Liberal Party candidate here in the riding of Etobicoke Centre. I've lived in Etobicoke with my wife and our 2 children for the past 10 years. I was born in Toronto downtown, and like many people, gradually moved further westward in search of housing, and I'm delighted to have ended up here. I work as a university professor. I teach at the Faculty of Law at the University of Windsor, and that is one of the things that got me interested in public service and running for office, acquiring some familiarity with the legal system and getting excited about the idea of contributing in some small way to having better laws that work well for everyone and better government generally. I'm very grateful for the good life that I've been able to have in Etobicoke and that my family's been able to enjoy. And I would be very honored by the opportunity to try to protect the things that make life in Etobicoke good, in particular the environment, but also extend the opportunities that I've had and others have had so that everyone surrounding us has the opportunity to live a good life in peace and prosperity and harmony with social justice. So perhaps I won't say anything more at the moment. I'm looking forward to the opportunity to have a conversation about our platform.
Thank you very much, Noel. And I will let Heather say her opening remarks, and then I'll have something to say about the absence of King Surma. But first of all, Heather.
Unmute myself. There we go. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today. And special thanks to all the organizers and the community members. I know there are many of you in the background helping to pull all this together. Yeah, and my name is Heather Vickers-Wong, and I am so proud to live here in Etobicoke Centre. My ties to this community go way back from before the time I was even born, as I now live where my mother grew up and my grandparents lived. I can't tell you how amazing this community is with its hardworking, dedicated, and welcoming people. I also know that despite working so hard, a lot of families in our community are feeling squeezed. They feel things are broken and that no one is working for them. Our healthcare system is broken and we're waiting days and months just to get in front of a doctor while our pain and anxiety grows. The pandemic revealed how broken long-term care is and how the Doug-Ford Conservatives refuse to invest in protecting our seniors. My uncle is one of them. More than 4,300 long-term care residents died during this pandemic. Owning a home has become a distant dream for many, especially for young people, and everyday cost of living, gas, groceries, and childcare is through the roof. The life we are all working hard for seems out of reach, and it seems impossible to get ahead. Things can be better. On June 2nd, when NDP leader Andrea Horwath is elected premier, she will work hard for you, ready to fix the things that are broken. Andrea will invest, not cut. I'm so excited to be running to represent our community as part of Andrea Horwath's NDP. We have an ambitious vision that offers hope, with fully costed plan to fix what's broken, and I'm looking forward to talk about it with you. Thanks again for all coming out.
Thank you very much. A good start. And I regret to inform the audience and the other candidates with us tonight that the Ontario Progressive Conservative candidate, MP King Surma, will not be attending this evening, as is clear by now. Since Kinga is the incumbent, we first approached her in early April, long before the other candidates, offering her the choice of a few dates, and receiving no firm response within a 10-day period. We then secured the candidates from the other parties rather easily and quickly, and then continued to try and reach the incumbent with repeated invitations. She has confirmed in the past few days that she is unable to attend. No specific reason given. We were very disappointed to hear this, and will leave it up to the audience to assess her ability to accommodate this open and democratic meeting in this campaign schedule. And we'll leave it at that. We won't say more about that tonight, but we leave it up to you to consider what that means for you. Our first question tonight is on the environment, specifically greenhouse gas emissions. And Noel, you're going to be the first to answer this question. It is this: it is clear that we are in a climate crisis with heat waves, flooding, and other extreme weather events. The IPCC climate scientists have stated that we are on track for a 3°C rise in temperature by 2030, which is double the Paris Agreement target of 1.5. We must act with urgency. According to the IPCC, humanity has only a short window of opportunity to mitigate the worst effects of our humanity-created climate crisis. The culprit is the greenhouse gas emissions we produce every day. If elected, what are the measures your government will take to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions, including, but not limited to, building retrofit, updates to new building codes, green transportation, green industry propagation, green cities, and an electrical grid with no GHG emissions? Noel, our answers are 2 minutes, so you can start.
Thank you, Brian. We are indeed in a climate emergency in Canada and around the world. And I'm frankly disappointed by the progress or lack of sufficient progress that we've had in this country over the past 20 years. But I do feel that electing a Liberal government provincially is the very best chance we have to turn the corner on this. We have committed as a party to cut our GHG emissions by 50% relative to the 2005 emissions by 2030 and get Ontario to net zero by 2050. And we have several ways we're going to go about doing that. Carbon pricing is part of the answer. I'm a believer in carbon pricing. I've been a member of Citizens Climate International for a while. I think there's opportunities to harness the ingenuity of the market to meet our environmental goals. And a Liberal government will reinforce the industrial emitters program and make that stricter in Ontario. We'll also provide credits for true carbon offsets. If Ontario companies are innovating in a way that reduces emissions and helps others to do so, then we want to make sure that the incentive is there to do that. But pricing is not enough. And I say this as someone who tried to buy a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle a couple of years ago, and we placed the order, and then the car was not available because they were catching on fire in Europe. And anyway, the point is just that we need a more active approach as a government to transition to that green economy. So an Ontario Liberal government would put $9 billion in over the next 4 years for our clean economy plan. That's going to create 25,000 green jobs. We're also going to engage in an aggressive system of grants and retrofits and plant 800 million trees over the next 8 years. I see the red flag, so I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Noel. And the next is Heather, your response to the greenhouse gas emissions question.
All right, yeah, sure. Well, if the NDP were elected this June, we would tackle the elimination of greenhouse gases in these ways. We want to fully electrify the public transit system by 2040. We want to instill Ontario's first zero emissions vehicle strategy, ramping up electric vehicle sales to hit 100% by 2035. Mandate all new residentially public and commercial buildings to be net zero emissions by 2030, including a retrofit program to help existing homes become more energy efficient with grants between $7,000 and $11,000. We want to plant 1 billion trees by 2030. And we also want to create a new cap and trade program that's fair for everyone. And I think that's all I'm going to say.
All right. Thank you. The less time we take, we can take more time on another question. So that's good. Brian, over to you and the Green Party's response to the greenhouse gas emissions question.
Sure, thank you. So our climate plan is called Roadmap to Net Zero, and it's targeted at 2045. And it was developed by a superb team led by Diane Sachs, the former Environmental Commissioner of Ontario. This is a woman with an international reputation as an environmental lawyer. She was our Environmental Commissioner for the province of Ontario, a nonpartisan role, until Doug Ford eliminated the position because he didn't want the oversight of a neutral expert like her and her team reporting to the legislature every year. So we have 10 key strategies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And you'd expect that this would be a strength of ours, and it is. So we want a zero carbon law that sets a carbon budget to cut climate pollution in half by 2030 and to net zero by 2045. We're not relying on hypothetical technologies that don't exist yet, are not proving yet. This plan is entirely based on what is realistic right now. We want to reduce fossil fuel use in transportation by electrifying mass transit and buses. We will give subsidies for people to purchase electric cars and for people to purchase an e-bike, an electric bike. So $10,000 for cars and $1,000 for an e-bike buyer. We want to cut fossil fuel use in buildings, of course, through just vastly increasing our energy efficiency and producing and supporting the use of heat pumps. We want to make Ontario a global leader in clean energy and materials. We want to restore water and nature with the help of Indigenous peoples, protecting 25% of Ontario by 2025 and 30 by 2030. We want to reduce toxins, and that includes reducing waste and especially plastic waste.
Brian, can you wrap up, please?
Yeah, and several more things. So it's a very well-developed plan. Be happy to share its details with you.
Thank you very much. Just trying to be fair. As I tried to say earlier, we're asking questions on greenhouse gas emissions, which we just completed, biodiversity, poverty reduction, affordable housing, long-term care, and a sustainable green economy for everyone. And those questions have been preset and sent to the candidates, so they've been enabled to prepare a response to those questions. What we'd like the Q&A folks to enter into is questions about other topics potentially that we could ask after those 6 preset questions. So you've heard the topics that were covered already, and we'd invite your questions about other topics. But we're moving on to the biodiversity question now, the second question. And here it is, and Heather, you will be the first to answer this one. Biodiversity loss on an unprecedented scale is being driven by loss of habitat and is exacerbated by urban sprawl, climate change, and pollution. Farmland in Ontario is a precious and irreplaceable source of food in an era of increasing global food scarcity due to desertification, war, droughts, floods, and rising food prices. So what measures will your government take, if elected, to limit urban sprawl and ensure the protection of the green belt, wetlands, nature corridors, headwaters, and species biodiversity while preserving Ontario's rich farmland for food production? Heather, take it away.
Thank you, Brian. One of the first things the NDP would like to do is stop Ford's Highway 413 and the Brantford bypass developments, which paves right through rich farmland and greenbelt wetlands. It doesn't make sense to do that, and that would destroy very important farmland, which we rely on for food, and also wetlands and the greenbelt, which is home to many different species, and we want to protect them as much as we can, not stress them out and possibly cause them to go extinct, which is already happening to many birds out there. We also will reverse funding cuts to the conservation authorities, giving them tools to enforce watershed development regulations. The NDP will expand the Greenbelt to include vital green spaces like Carruthers Creek headwaters. Again, we want to plant 1 billion trees by 2030. Restore the powers of the Environment Commissioner. Ensure our forests are well managed with forest fire prevention, pest control, fire ranger support. Promote smart, sustainable growth, ending costly, unsustainable sprawl, and clean up the mercury from the Wabigoon conservation area once and for all, cleaning up water to safely drink once more for the people of Grassy Narrows and Wabigoon First Nations with the funding of a dedicated mercury treatment center.
Thank you very much. And next is the Green Party, and Brian.
Thank you. This is a topic very close to my heart. Let me just start at the grassroots level here in Etobicoke. We all have a piece of the job to do with biodiversity, whether it's just a planter on an apartment balcony or our backyards and front yards. We can be turning our lawns into biodiverse areas. The City of Toronto has just opened the way to do that. And we'd be contributing to biodiversity with native plants that serve birds and butterflies and bees, help with pollination of food plants. So there's a wonderful opportunity for us to really green Etobicoke further, as beautiful as it is already. My volunteer work as a nature steward starting this year is in a park, but as I say, any green space from a schoolyard like Kipling Collegiate, which now has has installed about 24 planters. I think they've delayed what they're going to be doing, but I look forward to what they'll be planting and demonstrating to students there, learning about plant propagation and food growing. So we have a wide range of things addressing biodiversity, obviously a strength of the Green Party and a passionate, underlying value for us, strengthening environmental oversight, protecting our waterways, strengthening animal welfare rules, safeguarding our source water. Mike Schreiner was first elected as an MPP because he was such a strong champion of protecting Guelph's groundwater that Nestle was using to make a profit by putting into plastic bottles. So he ended that, and the city of Guelph rewarded him by electing him. So protecting natural spaces, like I say, your own backyard, if you have a yard, is a natural space, is a part of nature, and let's all of us learn how to care for the plants that are within our area of responsibility, and also, the shared green spaces that we have. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off. Noel, you are the last on this question of biodiversity.
Thanks, Brian. So we'd start by canceling Highway 413, a completely unnecessary waste of $10 billion, which would also pave over 400 acres of the green belt, as well as lots of acres of farm. So canceling that is going to protect our biodiverse wetlands and green belt, as well as saving money. We're going to actually expand the green belt in cooperation with farmers and Indigenous groups. And we're also going to increase the proportion of Ontario land which is designated as protected. Right now it's 10%. We're going to protect 30% of the land in Ontario, as well as creating 5 new provincial parks so that people have those opportunities that Brian was mentioning to enjoy the wilderness. When it comes to climate change, the environment, and biodiversity, Doug Ford simply doesn't get it. And in case I don't have a chance later, I encourage people to think about the electoral history of Etobicoke Centre and look at which party is in a position to stop Doug Ford in our riding. And I think there's a lot of shared ground, and we have values that we're going to pursue together. But the nature of our electoral system is that there's only 2 parties that can win in Etobicoke Centre, and I represent one of them. So I hope that we can move forward together and pursue the values that we all share.
Thank you very much, Noel. We're moving on now to the more social conditions-oriented questions. And there's one on poverty reduction that we've sent to candidates, and it is as follows. And Brian, you will be the first to respond to this one. Poverty, unemployment, low wages, and other chronic and inequitable social and economic conditions have continued to either increase or maintain the gap between rich and poor, and therefore plagued low-income people in Ontario, the pandemic only making the situation worse and exposing pre-existing systemic inequities. People knowledgeable in poverty reduction methods have suggested often in recent years some of the following measures that could be taken, including ending pay inequality for part-time and temporary workers, increasing the incomes of those who rely on Ontario Works and the Ontario Disability Support Program, indexing social assistance rates to the cost of living, moving the minimum wage toward a living wage, instituting a guaranteed livable income, or what some people call a guaranteed annual income, ensuring pay equity regardless of gender, race, or immigration status, and legislating more adequate and protected paid sick leave days. Which of these measures or others will your party, if elected, take to reduce the poverty gap in Ontario? And please be as specific as possible, referencing some of those possible measures in your answer. Brian, take it away.
Thank you. These are also very important questions for us. People sometimes think of us as just focused on the environment, but we know that society is an environment, and that we're all people need to be cared for within it, just like an ecosystem needs all parts of it to be healthy. So we look at, the nature of the challenge, and not, what little percentage we might nudge up a rate of support. So Mike Schreiner has been arguing for months, and has just, recently committed to doubling the Ontario Disability Support Program. It's now just a little over $1,000 a month, which is supposed to pay for a person's rent, food, and transportation and so forth. Completely unworkable. Ontario Works likewise. We want to, respect the rights of workers, whether they're part-time, temporary workers, or so-called gig workers. The guaranteed livable income is something that we've championed for years. And if you look back to older progressive conservative politicians like Hugh Segal, even Robert Stanfield, the federal conservative leader in the 70s, they also saw the value of this program to harmonize and simplify the social supports that we provide to those in need, with one straightforward payment instead of a ton of red tape and bureaucracy, and sometimes, dehumanizing interviews with social workers and so forth. Moving the minimum wage to a living wage, again, it's not about, let's add another $1 this year belatedly. It's about what is needed for someone to meet their needs in the city of Toronto. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Brian. And Noel, I believe you are next on poverty reduction.
Thank you, Brian. And in canvassing and knocking thousands of doors over the past month, I've had the opportunity to meet people in Etobicoke Centre from all different parts of the socioeconomic spectrum. And I know that life is very difficult for many people in our riding and across the province who are living in poverty. And the first thing that our government will do is increase ODSP rates by 20% over the next 2 years. We're also going to increase Ontario Works rates by 10%. In addition, we're going to reinstate that universal basic income pilot, which the previous Liberal government created and was canceled by the Doug Ford government, so we can learn about universal basic income. There's also several things that we're really excited about that can make life more affordable for all Ontarians, including Ontarians who are living in poverty. We want to cut the price of the TTC, and in fact, cut the price of all public transit across the province to $1 per ride for the next year and a half. We are very proud of this policy because not only can it save people trying to get to work and back lots of money, especially if you take the GO train, and you know how much that can cost, but it's also a way to protect our environment by giving a big boost to public transit, getting people into the habit of taking green public transit instead of driving. I'm a professional educator as a university teacher, and I believe very passionately that education can be a ladder for people to rise out of poverty, especially in our new economy, which is so based on services and technology. So a Liberal government is going to double OSAP student assistance. We're going to eliminate the interest on student loans. And we're also going to maintain the tuition freeze to try to make sure that our education system can be a ladder out of poverty for all Ontarians.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Heather on poverty reduction.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the NDP will immediately double the ODSP rate, lifting recipients out of the extreme poverty who currently only receive roughly $14,000 a year. And if you live in Toronto, that doesn't cover very much at all. So we want to help people receiving ODSP to get ahead and live a more reasonable life here in Toronto, if that's where you live. Increasing the minimum wage to $20 an hour by 2026, starting with an immediate raise from the current $15 an hour to $16 an hour in 2022, October the 1st. Then increase by $1 every year on May the 1st, ending in 2026 with $20 an hour. We'd also like to ensure the minimum wage is the only minimum wage, regardless of your status as a student, of your age, your gender, your race, or immigrant status. Minimum wage means minimum wage. We'd also like to implement 10 paid sick days. And inflation right now is at a 31-year high of 6.7% year over year. Wages only rose 3.4% during the same period and has not kept up. Women make up 59% of minimum wage earners, with more than half only getting part-time hours. So it's been a real struggle and we'd like to help.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've been trying to monitor the Q&A function on this call, this webinar, and a number of people have asked a few questions related to affordable rent. That is, in fact, our next question, affordable housing. And Noel, you'll be the first to answer this question. So here it is. Market rent accommodation prices are rising across the city and the province. For example, the average market rent for a bachelor studio apartment in Toronto is just over $1,200 a month, according to the CMHC in 2022. The median rent for a studio is higher at just over $1,500 a month. Individuals who earn the $15 an hour minimum wage for full 40-hour work weeks gross only $30,000 annually. An affordable 30% of gross income rent for some individuals would be $748 a month. Individuals on social assistance, such as Ontario Works, who get $8,800 a year, or ODSP, who receive $14,000, as some of you have said, a year, have housing allowances far below this range of 30%. And the wait list for subsidized housing is decades long. This housing affordability crisis has meant that many of these households are now clients of food banks in our area and in our riding. Insufficient income and insufficient affordable rental housing are intersecting to create growing levels of poverty and homelessness. So how will your party, if elected, improve rent regulation and housing insecurity for all renters, including those in private rental buildings? Noel, take it away.
Thanks, Brian. So housing unaffordability is really an issue which unites almost everyone who lives here. And knocking on doors, I found that it's a great concern for people who live in rental housing right now. It's also a huge concern for people who live in houses and are worried about whether their children will ever be able to afford to live in Toronto. And of course, those who live in apartments and aspire to own their own homes one day. So one thing we're going to do on this is reinstate rent control for all buildings. Doug Ford opened a loophole so that certain new buildings are exempt from rent control. We're going to close that so rent control applies to all rental housing in Ontario. I didn't get a chance to mention earlier that we are going to raise the minimum wage to $16 an hour, at least $16 an hour, and actually make that a regionally adjusted living wage, so that folks who live in higher cost parts of the province, like Toronto, for example, may have a higher minimum wage than people living in the countryside. Now, housing supply is a big part of the problem, and we have a plan to build 1.5 million homes over the next 10 years, in part by getting the province more directly involved in home building through the creation of an Ontario Home Building Corporation, a provincially owned Crown corporation that will be tasked with building homes where the private developers are not building them, including on provincial land, land that requires special zoning and things like that. But any homes created by this new Ontario Home Building Corporation will be available exclusively to first-time home buyers. I'm on the board of directors of South Etobicoke Community Legal Services, which is a low-income legal clinic, which does a lot of work with the Landlord-Tenant Board. And that's also an area of academic interest for me, dispute resolution, access to justice. The Landlord-Tenant Board is a part of the problem. It's actually in crisis right now. And it's something I would really love to work on if I had the chance to represent you at Queen's Park.
Thank you, Noel. And Heather, over to you on affordable housing.
All right, great. First, we must recognize housing is a human right. Everyone deserves a stable place to call home, a place that they can afford. The NDP will enable the construction of 1.5 million new homes over the next decade, including affordable housing options like duplexes and townhouses, walk-up apartments. We're going to make renting more affordable, giving renters more security. We will build 250,000 new affordable non-market homes over the next 10 years. This includes 100,000 new affordable homes charging rents geared towards your income. This includes 150,000 new non-market homes charging below market rents. Through Housing Ontario, we'll purchase and rehabilitate privately owned rental buildings, converting them to non-market, protecting these tenants permanently from speculation. We'll also bring back rent control and vacancy decontrol, meaning landlords can't hike prices between tenants. We regulate short-term rentals so they don't drive up market prices, and we'd end rent evictions.
Indeed. A term partly coined, I think, during the pandemic, right? Rent evictions. Anyway, over to you, Brian, on affordable housing.
Thank you. We published a comprehensive housing plan last year, so it wasn't just a rush job for the election. The Toronto Star editorial board called it a masterclass in housing policy that connects all the dots from homelessness to affordable rentals to home ownership. And they said Ontario Greens propose a way forward. So we want to build one of our 10 or so key policies is to build inclusive neighborhoods where people do not have to drive for everything, for their daily needs, that they're so-called 15-minute neighborhoods where you can walk and get exercise and meet your neighbors and meet your local storekeeper. So inclusive neighborhoods is important for the environment and for housing neighborhoods that we all want to live in. We will be protecting the places we love by not paving over farmland or wetlands for new homes. We'll create 100,000 new affordable rental units, and renew 260,000 existing community homes. The city of Toronto is behind on its upkeep of community housing, and residents are suffering as a result. We want to lead an Indigenous-led housing strategy for Indigenous communities. We want to end chronic homelessness with supportive housing spaces and take a housing first approach, and not just put them in overnight shelters indefinitely. We want to address speculation. There are equity firms that are now buying up houses like just so many lines on an accounting sheet, but it's people who are being unhoused in order for these folks to buy these houses and then rent them at a huge profit to satisfy their shareholders. We do want to reinstate rent controls, as others have said, and we want to provide pathways for home ownership. So lots of great ideas there. And as I say, the Toronto Star was just wowed by our proposals published last year. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Brian. We're now moving toward the last two questions, and then we're going to try to discern who's been upvoting important questions coming from the audience. So we'll get to that in a few minutes, but we have two more preset questions. This one is on long-term care, and Heather, you will be the first to respond. Although the Long-Term Care COVID-19 Commission, the Auditor General, and numerous other organizations found that for-profit long-term care homes provided poor quality care, the current government is renewing or providing additional licenses for operators of for-profit homes. Recognizing that inspections have been inadequate in the past, how does your party intend to ensure, if elected, that the operators of all long-term care homes implement the mandated 4 hours of direct care, serve high-quality food, provide intellectually stimulating programs instead of simply television, and hire sufficient physiotherapists and other specialist staff to provide services such as daily ambulation, foot care, counseling, and so on that are so needed to maintain a high quality of life for our seniors. Heather, over to you.
Thank you, Brian. First of all, the NDP will make the entire system public and not-for-profit within 8 years. Any extended licenses to for-profit homes will be canceled or will either right away, or we'll have to hire some lawyers to try to work out on how to cancel them, because we do not want any for-profit homes to continue, not with what has happened during the pandemic. We'll promise better aging for all Ontarians, a system that gives loved ones more quality of life and not take it away. We want to hire thousands of PSWs and raise their wages by $5 an hour, making their jobs full-time and better paid. Scrapping Bill 124 under unfair wage cap. Yeah, and that Bill 124 is being applied to so many other care sectors and even our education system, and we don't like it and we want to get rid of it. The more staff we have, the better care people will receive. Put infection control specialists back into every home with adequate PPE for staff and residents. More than 4,000 people died alone in pain, and we must never let that happen again. Make family caregivers partners in care, improving quality of life. And the NDP will guarantee stronger protections, committing to comprehensive inspections, seniors advocates, and more. And 4 hours of care will be mandated through legislation.
Thank you very much. And Brian, over to you and the Green Party's response to long-term care.
Thank you. We've got, again, very developed policies in this area. We know that we do also want to phase out for-profit long-term care facilities. A for-profit business of any kind tries to minimize expenses and maximize profit. And that just is an obscenity when it comes to our elders who deserve our respect and care. We want to increase base funding. We want reinstate annual comprehensive inspections, which the Ford government suspended shortly before COVID struck at the worst possible time. We want to transfer oversight of retirement homes to a Ministry of Long-Term Care. We want to build more long-term care beds. We want to ensure that the staffing includes medical professionals, at least 20% registered nurses, another 25% of registered practical nurses, and 55% of personal support workers. We want to prepare now for future infectious disease outbreaks because, we had SARS within memory. We've had COVID obviously recently, and we're not over with it yet, even though the Conservatives seem to wish that we were. We all wish that we were, but it's not gone yet, and it may resurge in the fall. The United States government is warning of that. And we want to expand options to age in place as well. So folks who do want to stay at home, we want to provide supports where that is possible so that they can do so. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. And lastly, Noel, on long-term care crisis.
Yeah, it is a crisis. And, it's probably the number one thing that people want to talk about at the door. Some people have terrific elder care for themselves, and some people have their own parents in long-term care facilities that are doing a wonderful job, which gives me hope that it is possible to get this right. But at the same time, so much has gone wrong in this sector. And it was, I think, a moment of shame for all of us as Ontarians to see how abysmal conditions were in long-term care facilities, including the Eatonville home during the pandemic, and how these most vulnerable people in our society bore the brunt, and we weren't able to be there for them. So some facilities are doing it very well, and that gives me hope we can get it right. I also feel there's a lot of consensus between what we've heard tonight and our own views. We also are committed to ending for-profit long-term care. A Liberal government will buy back those facilities, bring them into the public sector, because the data shows quite clearly that when long-term care facilities are run by municipalities or by nonprofit groups, the outcomes are just a lot better. We're committed to providing those 4 contact hours per day that you mentioned, Brian, for people in these facilities. And really, it's all about staffing. Like, Doug Ford is obsessed with hard hats and shovels in the ground and building things, and that's valuable, but the real problem is one of staffing. We need to get enough high-quality, trained, dedicated people working with our elders, whether that's in long-term care facilities or at home. So a Liberal government is going to raise personal support worker wages to $25 per hour, bring more good people into that line of work, provide those 4 hours a day, and emphasize smaller homes where there's more in-person contact. It's a more human way to live. We all know what needs to be done, but there's only one name on your ballot on the June 2nd that can actually beat the Conservatives here and make sure these things happen.
Thank you very much. Now, we're entering our last question that is a preset one that we sent to the candidates. It's on the greening of an economy for everyone, particularly in a post-COVID world, if we ever get there. Here's the question. And let's see, Brian, you're going to be the first to respond. In a transition to a green economy for all Ontario, we must provide the training workers need to transition into new green infrastructure and building trades. New zero emissions building codes need to be in place for that to happen. Unemployed and underemployed folks and youth can be trained as apprentices in the skilled trades and be given the opportunity to build our new green lifestyle and economy for everyone. So what steps would your government take, if elected, to fund and create both training and job opportunities while building a stronger green economy for all, and I would add, in a post-COVID world? Over to you, Brian.
Thank you. There are some wonderful examples here in Etobicoke of businesses and organizations that are showing the potential for a green economy. There's a mobile phone provider who has a car charging station, electric car charging station powered by solar panels. They also have beehives that are managed by beekeepers, and a greenhouse, all on their property, making their own vehicles run through green energy, but also supporting local agriculture. Burnhamthorpe Collegiate has a beautiful new farm on what was its soccer field. You all should visit it. They have a market day once a week, probably not quite open yet this early in the season, but they are training young people to be urban agriculturalists, to run farmers markets like the one they have, and teaching people about recycling as well. Catherine Hayhoe, who's an Etobicoke-born star of the climate science world, she says that climate change is a justice issue, and that people now in poorer areas of the world are suffering because of the because of the greenhouse gases that we are producing in the richer part of the world. So we have to take responsibility for that, and we have to do what we can to create work here that is meaningful. We're proposing 60,000 for 60,000 young people, free tuition in learning green trades. So a 1 year's free tuition followed by 1 year's supported initial year on the job. So like I said at the beginning, I would be so excited if I were a young person to move into all of these wonderful opportunities to do meaningful, important work in the green economy that's now open to us, and we want to support those new possibilities with retraining, because we actually don't have enough people now with the skills to be retrofitting our homes. Thank you.
Thank you. And Noel, over to you and the green economy for everyone.
Yeah, so I love the phrase green economy, because that's exactly what we need. Greenhouse gas emissions, it's not just another pollutant that we can just kind of regulate. Our economy is so dependent on fossil fuels in so many different ways that we need to create a complete new green economy. And we need to make this transition in a way which includes our young people and lets our economy prosper. So a Liberal government has a plan to create 25,000 green jobs, and they're urgently needed, right? I mean, I meet folks who say they'd love to buy an electric car, but their condo or their apartment doesn't have the right charging infrastructure, so they wouldn't be able to get around. So then you talk to the management board of the condo, why don't you have charging stations? Well, they say they can't find the people to install them. And so we really need to think about it on a systemic level and think about all the different parts of our economy that are going to need to change, and which are going to need some push and support from the government to change in order to make this happen. Education is very important. We've talked already about what we're going to do to support, in particular, those students who will not be able to pursue education unless they get government help with expanded OSAP grants and eliminating interest on student loans. We also are the party that wants to be creative about transitioning to the new economy. So the 4-day work week is something that we want to create a pilot to study. You know, as people are more and more working online, can we create more flexible work models that create work-life balance for people? Maybe let people stay out of the car, which of course helps the environment and the economy as well. Again, dollar per ride public transit is something that's going to give a real boost to public transit. It's going to increase demand greatly, and that's going to mean more buses, more service in our public transit, which will in turn make public transit a more affordable and convenient option for people.
Thank you. And lastly, Heather, on a green economy for all of us.
Yes. Well, the NDP has a plan to create hundreds of thousands of jobs and kickstart Ontario's recovery and make us a global leader. Under the launch of our Green New Democratic Deal and Climate Jobs Hope Plan, 100,000 jobs will be created with upwards of 1 million jobs over its lifetime, working on one of the world's largest green building retrofit programs. Together with the green housing, we also want to be the leader of electric vehicle production, with $6,000 grants given to those who will install charging stations in their home. The NDP will make important investments in post-secondary education and workforce development to prepare for the in-demand jobs of an innovation economy. Through Youth Climate Corps, now, as a side note, Toronto's youth unemployment rate is right now at 24%, and a youth is described as someone between 15 and 24 years old. Young Ontarians will be given hands-on skills and experience, restoring and enhancing Ontario's natural landscape while earning a fair wage and free credit towards post-secondary education. We will invest to create thousands of new unpaid placements, new paid placements for post-secondary students to get real-life work experience and help young people get the training and education they want to build their best lives, graduating without debt.
Very good timing. Thank you, Heather. Now, we've been monitoring the Q&As, and we've got a couple of questions. I think we've got a good amount of time left, so I'm going to try to squeeze in 2 or even 3 questions for each of you from our audience. The first one is this: can you please comment on COVID? People and scientists feel COVID isn't over, and they're concerned about long-term COVID and various variants and so on. What measures would your government, if elected, take to continue to combat COVID and/or other kinds of variants or pandemics? And I think, Noel, you are first this time. Over to you.
Thank you. So we're at a very interesting point in our odyssey with COVID. Some people feel like it's over. Other people are very much aware that it isn't. And as someone who is triple vaccinated and continues to wear a mask inside, I definitely feel this is something we need to finish the fight on as a government. So an Ontario Liberal government would add the COVID-19 vaccine to the list of required vaccines for schools. And that's something that we feel is kind of the foundation going forward. Our children, my children, are required to get lots of different vaccines for diseases that once were common, and thanks to this miracle, which is vaccination, are no longer common, like smallpox and so forth. And so we're going to add the COVID vaccine to that list. We are going to require vaccinations for frontline health and education workers. Students going into our schools and people going into our hospitals should be confident that everything possible is being done to reduce the risk of spread in those places. You know, I think we all hope that we can move past this and talk about our recovery and what's next. What's the next chapter in the history of Ontario? And we don't want to go back to the divisive days and the sort of social tensions that were created in the worst parts of the COVID pandemic. But I believe very firmly in evidence-based government and listening to science. I think the Doug Ford government's failure to do so made the COVID pandemic far worse than it had to be and far more disruptive in Ontario than it could have been. And an Ontario government led by the Liberal Party of Ontario is going to do something very different.
Thank you, and over to you, Heather, and the NDP's response to the COVID crisis.
Yeah, well, I don't know, the whole system just kind of collapsed in itself. And I think a major reason was because there were so many cuts made to our healthcare system. We had nurses who have been working double shifts and not having a break, and just really being run off their feet. And this has caused many healthcare workers to actually want to leave the system, making our situation even worse in hospitals and unable to keep up with the demand that COVID presented to us. Part of another problem was that our healthcare workers were not being paid enough because of the wage caps under Bill 124. Thank you to the Conservative government. So lifting that hopefully will entice more care workers to enter the system. And when we have more workers present, we can deal with the influx of patients coming into the hospital system, or even just a regular doctor's office. We need more support to handle the needs that are coming in, and I think that's what's really needed. But also just following public health recommendations of proper PPE. Keep it going.
Thank you. And lastly, Brian, on our continuing response to the COVID crisis.
Yeah, thank you. When I travel on buses recently, I see sometimes 25, even 50% of people on the bus are not wearing face masks now. Some bus drivers do kind of point to their face and ask people to, and others just don't want to get in an argument with their riders, and that's certainly understandable. But why do people suddenly feel free to dispense with these masks? I mean, I sat across from a family of 4, and I thought, aren't you worried about your children's and your spouse's safety? And clearly, you know, they feel they've been given permission to dispense with them. So where do they get that idea? Well, I and a friend of mine attended the campaign launch of our Conservative candidate and sitting MPP, and in the inside space where more than 80 people were gathered, including the Premier, the Minister of Education, the Minister of Long-Term Care, and Kinga Surma herself, the Minister of Infrastructure. Nobody was wearing a mask except for me and my friend, and maybe 2 other people out of 80 or more people. So these politicians are sending the message that it's over, it's a done deal, we can move on. And we know that that's not the case. Schools need to be protected. Kids are contracting it in schools and taking it home. So we need to improve the equipment that provides clear air circulation within schools. That's an ongoing task that has to be intensified. Yeah, it's just a problem that isn't going away right away. We still have to be careful, and we have to be, as figures in the public, we have to be sending the right message, and not just reacting because it's sort of bad for business politically. So there's a lot to learn from. Another thing is, of course, paid sick days, which Doug Ford refused to enact.
Brian, I'm going to cut you off there. I'm sorry, but yeah, the timekeeper for a reason, and she keeps me on track, and I'm trying to keep us all on track. So I want to move on to another question. I believe you all answered that one. And Heather, you're going to be the first to respond to this one. It's about proportional representation, and some of our viewers have been asking, would you be in favor of converting our electoral system to the more democratic model of proportional representation? Will you support an Ontario referendum on the question of proportional representation after this election? Heather, over to you.
Yes, I would be in support of a referendum. on that question, because it is important to find out what our community and what the province thinks about such an issue. I think that it is something that was promised before by the Liberals several elections back, and it never came to be. And it's kind of disappointing. And it just kind of disappeared, that question. So I would like to see it brought back to the forefront, and let's talk about it. Let's find another way, if possible, to run our elections.
Thank you very much. And Brian, over to you. Proportional representation.
Sure. The Green Party has been longtime supporters of proportional representation, and for several reasons. I'll just quote one thing from the Ontario legislature when the government side faces the opposition side. Carved in the wood above the opposition are 3 Latin words, which means listen to the other side. Mm-hmm. Now, if there's been a government that has listened less to any other side than the present Conservative government, I can't remember what it is. So a party that earns 39% of the vote, say, should not inherit 100% of the power. Proportional representation means that every party is at the table, even if it's one person from a very small party. And that means different points of view are addressed, just like around the dinner table. If only one person gets to decide everything, then all the other experiences and talents at the dinner table are silenced, and poorer decisions result because it's only one person's perspective. So ranked ballots is something that's been proposed by the Liberal leader, and we disagree with that because, again, it will result in one party getting 100% of the power rather than be forced to sit around a big conference table and, argue things out and find common ground and compromises. But the decisions would reflect the entire body politic, not just the winning side with 39% of the vote, for example. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Noel.
Thank you, Brian. So we don't have any current plans to implement proportional representation, but we are committed to introduce the ranked ballot for the next provincial election and to give municipalities the option of using ranked ballots in local municipal elections. So for folks who may not be familiar, the ranked ballot means that each voter is given the opportunity to indicate not only their first choice, but also their second and third choice. And we feel this lets voters better represent what they actually feel and who they want to represent them. It also promotes cooperation because candidates are incentivized to speak to the entire electorate and to try to attract support, second choice support from those who might support other candidates. Kinga Surma might be here tonight if she knew that she had to think about attracting second choices on a ranked ballot instead of just mobilizing the 35% or 37% core and ignoring the 63% that are looking for something different, but might be considering it as a second choice. So the system that prevails for this election is first past the post, and obviously, as I've said, we plan to modify that in a way. But the reality is that Etobicoke Centre can only elect one person, and each voter can only check one name on that ballot. This has always been an extremely close riding, which has swung between Liberals and Conservatives. In the 2011 federal election, the margin was 26 votes. It could be that close again. So while we look forward to modifying the system and making our democracy more valid, I hope people will consider carefully the option before them in this election.
Thank you. And further to the notion of democracy and even this meeting tonight, this town hall, we need to clarify for our audience that we only invited candidates who represent parties who had an elected MPP. We recognize that there are others on the docket, but we only invited candidates from parties who have already at least one elected MPP. And that was our criteria for the invitation tonight. Not everyone might have liked that policy, but that was our policy, and I just wanted to clarify it for our audience. Our last question, I think, from the audience is this. Can you expand on your funding model for public education and the strengthening of public education in the province of Ontario? Brian, you are first as the Green Party representative.
We want to re-examine the formula that is used for allotting funding from the province to school boards. We think that needs to be updated and made more site-specific. There are schools that have higher levels of students with special needs, and they need special funding to serve those students. I'm sorry, I'm struggling for the rest of the policy. Let me pass the baton back. Thank you.
Okay, and over to you, Noel, on the question of the funding of our public education system.
Thanks, Brian. So as the parent of 2 children who are enrolled in Etobicoke public schools right now, this is an issue which is very dear to my heart. And it's one of my big reasons for running, is to try to get our public education system back on more stable footing. A Liberal government would cap class sizes at 20 students, and that we'd hire 10,000 more teachers to make that happen. We're also going to cancel Highway 413, as we said earlier, which is going to save $10 billion, and all of that will be reinvested in our schools, renovating them and building new ones where we need them. Another important thing to recognize about our schools is that our teachers, perhaps more so than 40 or 50 years ago, have to be serve all sorts of roles. They have to help students who have special educational needs and help students who have mental health challenges. And it's very, very difficult. If you talk to teachers nowadays, they'll tell you to do that while at the same time delivering the curriculum. So we want to hire 1,000 more mental health professionals to be put in the schools to help students who need that. As well as special education workers to again help students who have those particular needs. So you mentioned the funding model. One thing that's very important to us is introducing an optional grade 13 for students who need it. And so right now, some students will do an extra year after grade 12, but the problem is that the schools are not funded for it. Right. So the schools are strongly incentivized to kind of push people through and get them out, even students who could really benefit from that extra year, especially after these 2 lost years from COVID. So a Liberal government would have a fully funded optional grade 13 so that the school boards and the principals and the teachers can offer that opportunity to students who need it and position them to succeed, but without suffering and funding when they do so.
Thank you very much. And Heather, lastly to you on the question of public education funding.
Yeah. Well, I know that we would like to reverse the cuts that Ford made to education. And there have been many other conservative governments over the past I would say at least the past 10 years, who have continued to cut money from our education system. And we'd like to kind of restore that. We want to be able to hire more teachers, and we also want to hire more mental health workers and child and youth workers and supports, and maintain a full kindergarten day, capping also the kindergarten students to 26, and for our high schoolers, provide enough support and attention for everyone. We want to address issues to keep classrooms safe and conducive to learning, and set clear definitions on racism, procedures to address it, and resources for students who have experienced it. And I do want to point out that for every dollar that you put into education, you get back $1.30 after they graduate and into the workforce. So it makes sense to make sure that our education system is fully stocked, so to speak. But I don't have the exact numbers before me on how it all breaks down budget-wise. That will be something I'd have to get back to you on.
Thank you very much. Listen, all three of you have done really, really well tonight. Thank you for the civil conversation, for the exchange of information. We're going to turn to each of you now for closing remarks. If there's something that you want to tell the voters before you haven't had a chance to say, now is your opportunity. So I'm going to turn first to Noel of the Liberal Party for a closing remark. 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Brian. So this is a very important election, as I think we all recognize. We have the opportunity to turn the page, move past the era of COVID, and move past the era of Doug Ford government. It's a government which has consistently favored its friends, developers, well-connected lobbyists. It's simply Doug Ford's approach to government. He has his buddies, and he's willing to do what it takes to help them out. And it's the people of Ontario who have paid the price for that. Whether it's a matter of building this unnecessary, wasteful environmental catastrophe, which is Highway 413, which many developers and donors to Doug Ford will profit from, whether it's continuing the system of privatized long-term care, which has failed our seniors so badly, or whether it's the approach which has been taken to the pandemic, which involves seemingly random policy changes and reactions which are more about pandering to a small libertarian core at the Conservative base than they are about doing what's necessary to protect all of us as Ontarians. A Stephen Del Duca Liberal government is going to be very different. It's going to be evidence-based. It's going to be compassionate. It's going to be prepared to support the people in our society who need it most, whether that's our students in public schools, our senior citizens living independently in their homes and in long-term care homes, or whether it's those who are struggling in poverty. Of course, the environment and climate change, I think, are the issues that people are going to look back in 50 years and ask us, what did we do? And it's only a Liberal government which is positioned to beat Doug Ford here in Etobicoke, turn the page towards better evidence-based government, and work for all Ontarians. And I hope to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And next is Heather with closing remarks.
All right, thank you. Well, we've talked a lot tonight about what the candidates up here on this forum have done or will do to make our community better for all of us. I think everyone up here speaking loves Etobicoke Centre and truly wants to do their best for us all. In Etobicoke Centre and across Ontario, everyday life, from filling up the gas tank to buying a home and raising a family, has become harder and more expensive. Worst of all are the cuts we've seen to the public services we've all used and count on. Ford cut billions of dollars from healthcare, long-term care, home care, education, the environment. He actually spent millions to rip already installed charging stations. And the Liberals, they cut too. That's why we ended up with hallway medicine. When people in Etobicoke Centre and across Ontario see life getting harder, when we work so hard and still find it difficult to get ahead, it's no wonder a lot of us are cynical and fed up with politics. I'm running to be your MPP because I'm fed up too. I know we deserve better, and I know that if we come together, we can fix what's broken. We can have a healthcare system with more nurses, PSWs, and healthcare staff, with shorter wait times and no hallway medicine. We can have a dental and mental care plan for all. We can have a home care system that is fully funded and staffed so our parents and grandparents can stay at home with comfort around loved ones for longer. Families can have affordable childcare. Folks can afford homes. This hope starts with electing Andrea Horvath and the NDP. With your vote on June 2nd, we can elect a government that puts people at the heart of every decision it makes, working for you.
Thank you, Heather, for that closing remark. And lastly, Brian, for the Green Party.
Thank you, Brian. You know, we have a fair amount of common ground between the three candidates you're meeting tonight, and that's a good thing. I was reminded, my mind flashed back to a visit I made for business to Atlanta, Georgia, and I certainly made a point in my free time to visit the Martin Luther King Museum. And one of his famous quotations is of really burning importance to us today as ever. He said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly." And that is the kind of bottom line belief that unites all of the green policies. And I want to urge people to think not just strategically, because that's allowing yourself to be bullied by one of the two leading parties that have bounced back and forth in power in most of Ontario's history. I would urge you to vote for what you believe in, for the vision that you want to express with your vote, and not subsume your point of view under another party that is doing some of the job you want done. So if you believe in the kind of future that our policies aim for, and that our thoroughly decent people like Dan Sachs and our leader Mike Schreiner advocate so intelligently and passionately, please consider voting green. I would love your support, and I'd love to hear from any of you who want to contact me directly after this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All three closing remarks, very nice, thank you. And from one Brian to another, I now get the closing remarks for this event tonight. Thank you, Alex. I want to thank all of you for attending. I've noted well over 100 people at some points in our evening, and that doesn't represent the full number of participants because some people come in and out. We're at 91 at the moment, and all of you who have attended and taken in this conversation, I want to thank you for attending and exercising your right to more information about your candidates. I want to thank the three candidates who've been with us tonight: the Ontario NDP representative, Heather Vickers-Wong, the Ontario Liberal Party, Noel Semple, and the Green Party of Ontario, Brian McLean. Thank you very, very much for coming. And this event was organized, as you know, by ECULINKS Etobicoke and Etobicoke Climate Action, with support from GreenPAC and other sponsoring organizations, including LAMP Community Health Centre, Daily Bread Food Bank, Lakeshore Affordable Housing Advocacy and Action Group, Central Etobicoke Community Hub Initiative, and the Humber Valley Village Residents Association. And we thank them for promoting this event and enabling it to have as wide an audience as it has had tonight. We want to remind all of you who are here not to forget to exercise your democratic right and fulfill your responsibilities as a citizen by voting for the candidate of your choice in this important election. My understanding is that advanced polls open tomorrow. And so we, as of tomorrow, have time and opportunity to exercise that right, and we hope that you take it and run with it. We would invite you to consider taking the survey from GreenPAC by scanning the QR code now on your screen or your iPhone or whatever device you're using. And you can feel free to contact the organizers at the emails on the screen, admin@etobicokeclimateaction.ca or info@eculinks.ca. And note that the websites of both those organizations will be updated to contain a link to the video of this session tonight. so that you can share it with others who were unable to attend, and further the information that's being shared in our riding for people to make informed decisions. It will also have the contact information for the two organizing groups, and I'm sure that you can obtain the information for each of the three candidates if you want to get back to them. Lastly, consider completing the brief 4-question Zoom survey we will have on your screen in just a moment, and we'll keep this a live webinar while you answer this 4-question survey, so that we can plan for similar events in the future and continue serving our community through this public service. Thank you again for attending, and all the best as we head toward Election Day. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.